We're here now with Dr. Derrell Peel, our OSU Extension livestock marketing specialist. And Derrell, we're a little over halfway through the year now, so that's a good time to do a check-in on the livestock and the beef markets. Kind of get us up to speed on how things are looking.
Yeah, as we get into July here, since the 4th of July, we have seen cattle and beef markets pull back a little bit, pretty much across the board. And so, box beef prices have dropped pretty sharply here in the last week or so. Fed cattle prices and feeder cattle prices have also pulled back a little bit. And there's been a lot of action in the futures markets as well. A lot of weakness there as those markets have kind of readjusted.
Yeah, so does that mean we've kind of hit the peak for the cattle markets at this point?
There's some folks that kind of think that, but I really don't think we have at this point, largely because the fundamentals haven't changed. We've talked about this for months and months and months. The supply fundamentals haven't really changed. We haven't done anything to increase cattle inventories or beef production at this point. Those things are still tightening. I think this is just kind of the midsummer doldrums. It's been the heat of the summer. We've had a lot of hot weather, unusually hot weather in parts of the country. I think that's probably stifled beef demand a little bit. That's what's causing the box beef markets to weaken a little bit. And these other markets have again, it's summertime weakness, and so they're kind of doing a bit of a correction, but I don't think it represents any major change in the overall tendencies of these markets.
Yeah, you're talking about hot weather, but we've also had quite a bit of rain in certain parts of the state. How is that changing the outlook for the forage and the hay conditions?
We've seen quite a bit of improvement in the drought conditions in Oklahoma and generally around the country in many places, with the drought monitor, for example. One of the things that we noticed, though, in Oklahoma is that we haven't seen a lot of increase yet in our forage ratings, if you look at the weekly pasture ratings. And I think that really just illustrates how hard it is to catch up once you start behind. Once you get behind and get into the heat of the summer, even with the rain we've had, we're growing some pasture, we're probably making some hay, but the ratings are really not catching up to where we would have been because we just got off to a slow start and got behind going into the summer.
Yeah, and I know we've had a lot of stuff going on in the cattle industry recently. How are we looking kind of in comparison to this time last year?
We're, as far as pasture conditions and so on, I think we're probably in reasonably good shape. Again, we did have that late start. So, I'm not sure where we are exactly with hay production. I suspect it's down a little bit, and I know some parts of the country are still struggling as far as that goes. Cattle markets are still above where they were this time last year anyway. And so, even with the sort of recent summer weakness we've had, we're still generally on the long-term uphill that we've been on for quite a long time.
So, kind of looking forward to the next part of the year, what are you expecting to see?
Well, given what I just said, as we get into the second half of the year, I think these markets will pick back up. I don't see any fundamental weakness in beef demand. We keep monitoring it, but we've actually seen a little bit of improvement in inflation. Gas prices kind of came down. There's a lot of uncertainty in the geopolitical world right now. But I think broadly speaking, we're not seeing any additional weakness really at this point. So I really expect these markets to pick back up and continue to move higher generally with some seasonality as we go into the second half of the year.
What's your advice for producers right now?
I think you just want to stick with your plan at this point, continue forward. If you were, if you were in some sort of rebuilding mode, I don't think anything has changed to suggest any modifications to that plan. Otherwise, you're just trying to manage costs and take advantage of these markets.
All right, well, thanks, Derrell. We'll catch up with you in a couple weeks.